Hey folks, Eric here from TOURNA-MIX, the ultimate mix competition website. I hope you're doing well. It's been a while. Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a great holidays and Happy New Year so far. I wish you the best in 2023 with all your mixing endeavors. All right, so as always, we host 2 mix contests every month. So if that's the kind of thing you think you'd enjoy, go check it out. There's a link in the description below. And in today's video, we're going to be checking out one of our January 2023 songs. Really cool song by Elias Shamoun, and it's called Fool Without You. We're going to have a listen in 2 seconds. I want to give a big shout out to the company Pulsar. I'm going to call up some of their awesome plugins here on the screen for you. Pulsar sponsored us this month for this contest, actually, for this song. And they've got some really great plugins. These are the 3 that they generously provided to us for our prizes this month. So I did a special feature on their plugins. I've never used them before. Really enjoying them. So we're going to come back to these in a second. Let's have a listen to this song just so we can orient ourselves. And then we're going to go through my mix. This is not the official mix, okay? The official mix was done by a fellow named Michael Lido. So this is just my effort. Let's have a listen and then we'll get right into the processing.
Tell you how I feel, can you take it all in? I know that you might be confused because I said we're just friends. I'm so sorry that I didn't say what you wanted when you said that I was all you ever wanted. I think it's time I spill out the truth and be honest. I need to tell you I'm so glad I found you. I can't imagine living life without you. Just being honest, I don't know what I'd do. I hope you know that I'm a fool without you. I remember when we met and I looked in your eyes.
Yeah, so amazing pop song, as I'm sure you can hear. In my opinion, there's no reason that couldn't be a huge hit. All right. So, yeah, this was an incredible set of tracks, okay? Honestly, the raw tracks were as good as we've had, I think, at TOURNA-MIX so far. You can see here, I didn't even really use many plugins at all. This is the whole session right here. So we're going to hop into that. But yeah, great job by the band. Great song, great production, just awesome. Real quick, let's just hear the raw tracks. I've literally muted everything. The only thing I kept on was my final limiter just to kind of keep the volume approximately the same, but check out the raw tracks.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
All right, so the vocal you can hear sounds obviously not ready for release, but let me just mute the vocal and we'll just hear the band. Right? Sounds awesome. So whenever you have tracks like this, you know, you have to just remind yourself, okay, I'm probably not going to have to do very much. So let's build this mix up. The drums were like, they were basically mix ready. Okay. I'll show you what I did, but it wasn't much. The only thing I did here, I'll pull up my 3 plugins. I added the massive passive emulation here from Pulsar. This is a fantastic plugin. Really enjoying it. You can see I pushed up a bit of low end on the kick. This is at about 68 Hertz, okay? And that was it. For literally on a track level, the only thing I did to these drums was add a little bit of low end to the kick, okay? I'm going to talk a bit more about this plugin as we kind of move through the mix, but there wasn't a lot to show on this particular track, okay? So I just wanted a little more sub there. And then on my drum bus, okay, so this is all of the drums combined, I have a 1 compressor from Pulsar and a clipper, just, you know, knocking off the worst of the peaks, okay? Let me just close out that clipper. There's not a whole lot to show there. You can see that I'm clipping about 2 dB on my drum bus. Let's just check out this compressor for a second. You can see it's barely doing anything because, again, these drums sounded great on their own. All right. Now, what's super cool about Pulsar plugins is they kind of marry the best of both worlds. They have the analog modeled kind of thing, right? This is an 1178, which is sort of like a cousin of the 1176. But you've also got this modern kind of, graphic user interface with the visual feedback and a really, really handy sidechain here that I actually did use on this drum bus. Normally an 1176 style compressor, for me at least, is too fast for a drum bus. There's too much pumping that happens because the kick kind of triggers the compression too much. But with this handy sidechain here, you can see I've got it set to, what is this, at about 180 hertz, okay? So nothing below 180 hertz is being fed into the compressor. So we're going to get a more even kind of compression. So let me just let these drums play. All right, so you'll notice just hardly any gain reduction. I wasn't going for a big compressed sound here, but if I disengage the sidechain EQ, watch what happens over here to the compression. The kick gets totally killed, right? And it back on. We have a much more lively kind of sound without that stifled kick sound. See, again, with the kick triggering the compression, it kind of pumps and it makes the kick sound really small. Okay, so that is all I did for the drums. Okay, let me bring in the bass now, and let me just bring it in raw first. Let's hear this here. Now if I turn the plugins on, here it just kind of pops out a lot more. All right, let's check this out. First up, let me just turn them all off again. First up was the Massive. All right, Massive Passive EQ emulation from Pulsar. Really, really cool. I have a high pass at about 40 hertz here just because I wanted the sub of this song to come from the kick. So I didn't need anything below 40 hertz. And then I've got a big boost here, you can see. All right, this is a big boost at about 900 hertz approximately. All right, so if I turn it off, it's just kind of a bit dark and woolly sounding. Just sounds more defined. So it's so cool with this plugin having the analog sound, but then having the visual feedback. Super, super neat. Really, really enjoying this EQ. It's probably most famous for mix bus duties, but you can use this EQ on anything. It's just extremely versatile. I used it on pretty much every track this month because it was the only EQ I could use. I forced myself to use only Pulsar this month with maybe 2 exceptions. So that was my starting point. Then I fed it into an 1178, followed by the Mu. Okay, so this is the Mu compressor from Pulsar. And like I just said for the EQ, this is probably most famous for bus duties. But again, it's just a powerful compressor that can be used on really any track. So let's watch these compressors here. I've got 2 of them in series, 1178 into the Mu. You can see gentle compression here, just a bit. And then a little extra squeeze here. Okay, so that was my compression. And finally, just a bit of limiting. I almost always add a limiter at the end of my bass chain. It's not always working, but it just makes sure you don't get any unwanted flares in the low end. I think for modern mixing, it's really important to have a tight low end, and when your bass is out of control, your final limiter and your final mix bus compressor just have to work too hard, basically. So I find just 1 or 2 dB of limiting on bass never hurts. All right, so yeah, that's the drums and bass together. All right, so that's drums and bass done. So not much to show there. If we bring in the main synth of the song, I did absolutely nothing to it. That's this guy here, I believe. Let me unmute it. Oh, this guy. I didn't feel it needed any processing. Nothing. All right, and then, for the instruments, actually, I'm looking at all of the instruments here, and I didn't do anything to any of them. Okay, so I'm going to unmute all of those. So let's go to the chorus and just sort of listen. So all this stuff, just check over here. I was just checking to see if I'd done anything on like a group bus, but yeah, these instrument sounds were so well chosen that I didn't do anything to them. Now, as we'll see in a minute, of course, I do have some mix bus processing that is turned off right now, so those are going to affect everything. But again, with well-chosen sample sounds, like pop kind of sounds, VIs and stuff, you often don't have to do that much. Maybe a bit of filtering here and there, but really not that much. Now, there was a sax solo near the end of the song, which I'll quickly cover here. Let's this guy here. All right, so for this one here, I just added, I think, a little bit of EQ and compression. So actually quite a bit of EQ. Let's take a look at these guys here. All right, so we have, actually a monster boost to the high end. So this is like, above 6.5K, which is a huge boost. I love doing tutorials with this plugin because you can see what I've done. I don't even necessarily have to tell you. So big high pass, big boost, and then some compression, aggressive compression, and some reverb. If I turn off the EQ, you can hear without the EQ, it just sort of sounds a bit dull. Let me put it back into the mix here for a second. This is such a smooth EQ. I mean, it looks like I've boosted it to a crazy extent, but it's kind of like a parallel EQ sound, and it's just super, super smooth, okay? So that was the sax solo, and I just added some additional reverb to it. It seemed to have some reverb on it at times, but it needed more in my opinion. All right, so that is the full band, okay? Now what I might do now is actually go to the mix bus because, again, it's affecting everything, obviously. So if I go to the chorus here, let's just go through the mix bus processing. All right, so up first is the mu. I mixed into this. I added it fairly early on in the mix. All right, I've got a fairly fast attack. Okay, faster than I sometimes do. I just found it sounded okay. It didn't seem to smear the transients or dull the mix at all. I just thought it worked. And a fairly fast release, which is typical for mix bus. I think I don't know when a super slow release would be appropriate for mix bus. Maybe a really down tempo song. Okay, so I've got that going on, and then I've got the internal sidechain set to 200 hertz, and this is a big part of the sound. Let's just hear this on and off for a second. So you can see about 1 dB of compression. Now the vocals aren't in, so it's going to be doing less compression than it otherwise would. But if we adjust the internal sidechain here, let me turn this off, okay? And let me go back to the other visual feedback here. So listen without the internal sidechain. You can see the kick is affecting the compression a lot now, obviously, and let me just sort of toggle it on and off. So kind of like I showed earlier, it just breathes so much better with that internal sidechain set, okay? We don't get the pumping from the kick, just cleans it right up. This is a very, very handy section. All right, after the compression was the massive, and let me just turn that on, bring that out here. All right, so this was, adding a big boost to the high end, a little bit to the mid-range. You can barely see it here, but I'm cutting a little bit at 400 and then ever so gently pushing up 100 hertz, okay? So I've got this going on as well. Let's do a little on and off. Amazingly smooth EQ. Again, we've got a large boost here, but it just sounds super, super natural. This just really helped to perk things up and was probably part of why I didn't feel like I needed to do a lot to the instruments or drums, because I got a lot of mileage out of this one. And there was some further mix bus processing that I did. I might wait on that because this was added kind of near the end of the mix. So let me bring in all the vocals here and we'll talk about them. So let's just hear the first line of the song completely raw.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Right, so it's a good recording, but it has the typical symptoms of an unmixed vocal, a little bit boomy, lacking in definition, etc. So I can't tell. It looks like it might have been recorded with compression. It's a fairly even looking signal, although I'm not sure. Either way, I gave it a good healthy dose of compression. So let's take a look at the processing. I started with the massive and, just typical kind of stuff, just filtering out all the low end, 120 hertz high pass filter, little cut here in the low mids at about 400 hertz, and then perking up the mid range and high end. Makes a really big difference. If I turn it off,
if I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Right, it just thins out the vocal in a nice way and sort of tightens up the overall sound. We'll come back and listen to that in context, okay? But that was my first EQ, and actually only EQ. Then I did 2 stages of compression. So we're all familiar with the classic 1176 into an LA2A. So I did the 1178 into the Mu. Works really, really well. Let's check this out.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
All right, so, up to maybe 7 dB with the 1178 and then another 3 or 4 with the Mu. So, a solid 10 dB of compression, which is super normal for pop. You can often hit it even way harder. I just didn't think in this song it needed anymore. So I've got a kind of a fast attack, not the fastest, but I sort of played with this a little bit, and not the fastest release either. I thought it sounded better with a little bit of a slower release. Okay. So, so that was the compression. Let's just listen and watch that one more time.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Yeah, that felt good to me, okay? Then I limited the signal. I almost always limit pop vocals.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
On that particular line, it wasn't even being limited. So this probably just caught some of the peaks in the chorus. And finally, just a bit of sibilance control, okay?
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Now, that sounds far from a finished pop vocal, even though all my processing has been shown. And of course, what we need is effects, okay? So if I turn on the effects, we have this.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
To me, it never ceases to amaze me how effects change the sound. Let's listen to it without them again.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
To me, that sounds almost like a raw vocal. It doesn't sound mixed at all, but then the effects really bring out the shine in it.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in? If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Let me mute the EQ or bypass the EQ and just keep all the compression and effects on. Let's hear this.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Not bad, right? Sounds better with it though.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
And that was my mixing for the lead vocal. Really, really straightforward. I mean, I've had vocal chains a lot more complicated than that, but for this particular song, I really, really felt like the vocal was well recorded and sounded good. It mostly just needed, the effects and a little bit of compression and just a bit of brightening. Now, if you're wondering, well, what were those effects? Let's quickly check them out. So at first I only had the first 2. I'm going to mute this send, okay? So my starting effects was a typical for me at least, is about a 2-second plate, okay? With a long pre-delay. Let me check the pre-delay here. I think it was, I can't remember, 142 millisecond pre-delay, okay? So that's going to give almost a slapback effect on the reverb. Let's just hear just that effect.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in? If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
Right, so you can hear the slapback effect because of that long pre-delay. All right, so that was my starting point. Then I added some delay. All right, so that would be this guy here playing a stereo delay, I think it is. This effect. Yeah, so basically it's an 1/8 note delay that has some Haas effect added to it under the hood here. If you go into the tweak parameter here, you've got this width control. My understanding is this is basically adding like a Haas effect to the delay, okay? So yeah, we've got the delay going here. So this is what we have.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in?
And then near the end of my mix, I decided I wanted more of a long reverb sound. And so I actually added an additional plate that was much longer. This one's set up to about 5 seconds, okay? And it's and the pre-delay is still set quite long though. So it might seem kind of strange to have 2 plates going, but it's just where I ended up with it. And so I decided not to mute the first one. I just added another.
If I tell you how I feel, can you take it all in? I know that you might be
All right. So other than a few, little fun ear candy moments, like for example, if I open my automation on the vocal, I have, you can see these little bumps here. This is like your typical reverb throw.
When we met and I looked in your eyes.
Right? That kind of thing. So I did a few things like that. If I'd had a bit more time, I probably would have done even more ear candy, but I just did the bare minimum. So that was my lead vocal. Let's take a look at some of these group vocals because, for example, if we listen to the chorus here for a second, I'm just going to unmute all the vocals and I'm going to put them back on completely mixed here. Okay, so this is like basically a finished mix, except for these plugins, which we'll come to in a minute. Let's just hear these big group vocals in context.
Didn't say what you wanted when you said that I was all you ever wanted. I think it's time.
Let's go to the chorus.
I need to tell you, I'm so glad I found you. I can't imagine living life without you. Just being honest, I don't know what I'd do. I hope you know that I'm a fool without you.
All right, so those were cool. There was a whole bunch of them. I just hard panned all of them. It seemed to me like the idea was to add, the big kind of wide sound for the chorus. And I didn't really find that they needed much processing. Again, everything was so kind of well captured in this production. I did a very similar EQ job to the lead vocal, just getting rid of the lows and sprucing up the highs a little bit. Then I use an 1178 to hit the whole group. I have everything grouped here. Let's hear it.
I need to tell you, I'm so glad I found you. I can't imagine.
And you know what? I'm actually surprised I didn't hit that harder. Just a little bit of compression, but in context, I guess it wasn't bothering me. It sounded compressed enough. Got some limiting going.
Imagine living life without you. Just being honest.
Little bit of de-essing. And then I'm sending it to the same plate reverb as the other lead vocal. It would be the first plate reverb, the shorter of the two. So, and it was the same thing for the other group. There was a couple of different groups that I created here. One just for the chorus, and then there was one for the verse. Let me bring this guy in. This is what they sound like together.
I need to tell you, I'm so glad I found you.
Here's with the lead.
I can't imagine living life without you. Just being honest, I don't know what I'd do. I hope you know that I'm a fool without you. I remember when we met.
All right, and that was it. You can kill a lot of birds with one stone by just grouping things, right? We've got, I don't know, what is this, like 10 or 12 vocals that were handled by two auxiliaries. I've got these two auxiliaries set up that house all of those vocals. And then I just use super, super simple processing to kind of clean up the signal a bit. And that was it. I won't bother showing these little ad-lib vocals. It's just kind of more of the same thing, just reverb, high-pass filtering, and compression. And that was all that I felt these raw tracks needed, okay? Now, again, near the end of my mix, I sort of thought, hey, look, it doesn't quite sound shiny enough. So I brought in Pro Q3. This is more on the mastering level. Cut a little bit of low mids, added a little bit of extra thump down the middle. Okay, this is set to the middle band only. And a little bit of high end. So I brought in that kind of smiley face style EQ. All right, then I used inflator. This was just to get a bit of extra volume. Doesn't really change the sound that much, but I do find that this helps get me a louder master. All right, and then finally I brought in one of the only non-Pulsar plugins, and I use this mostly to get a bit of width. This stereo expander on the SPL Vitalizer is really, really nice, I find. Sounds good even in mono. It just does a good job. And then usually once I've done that, I experiment with adding a little bit of extra high end with this process knob. So this is adding like an additional high shelf above 1K. All right. So, with all these extra 3 plugins on, we ended up here. Let me just go to the chorus.
I need to tell you, I'm so glad I found you. I can't imagine living life without you.
Now let's just hear it without the EQ, okay, from Pulsar, because this is a pretty big move. Let me mute this.
I need to tell you, I'm so glad I found you. I can't imagine living life without you. Just being honest, I don't know what I'd do. I hope you know that I'm a...
Yeah, Yeah, I really, really like that. It's not that it sounds, bad per se without it. It just doesn't sound quite poppy enough. And I find that this is just such a smooth high shelf. It really, really helps to make things sound kind of more finalized. So yeah, just like that, there's my whole mix. I mean, it was a decent amount of tracks. I think there was, 40 or 50, maybe 50 tracks this month. Quite a decent amount, but they mixed up really, really quickly. There was not a whole lot of need to dig any deeper into them than that, at least for me and for my taste. I got where I needed to get to with this amount of processing, okay? Really, really enjoyed using these Pulsar plugins. I honestly can't recommend them enough if you, are sort of newer to mixing and you're looking for some good plugins that model analog hardware, but also have kind of the advantages of modern, a modern workflow with the visual feedback and stuff like that. These are really, really cool. For those of you that don't want the visual feedback, you can actually customize these plugins to be just like an analog look, right? Or just the visual. But yeah, it's an interesting workflow. We've got different ways of looking at the plugins. We've got the advantages of the sidechain stuff going on. We've got mid-side. I didn't really get into the mid-side today. I don't use mid-side, so that's why. But yeah, you can EQ mid-side. You can use the compressor. There's different options for, that kind of thing here, like in the middle, left, right, mid, side, that kind of thing. So lots of different flexibility for the modern kind of mixer in you. So yeah, these are cool. Thank you again to Pulsar for sponsoring us. That was awesome of you. I'm going to be doing another tutorial showing these plugins again soon. And yeah, that's Eric here from TOURNA-MIX signing off. I hope you enjoyed mixing this song, and I can't wait to see who wins the contest.